Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. I'm Julian Bonnici. Joining me today is Tim Diacono. Just a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by Miles Express. Miles Express is an independent global contractor offering goods transport and logistical solutions. Using their easy-to-use website, clients can quickly book their deliveries online, either as a one-time booking or upload multiple delivery orders. All delivery orders can be tracked in real time. Head over to www.milesxp.com to find out more. To run through today's headlines, they are as follows. James Caterer's boss and wife seriously injured in crash. PBS debt exposed in new figures. Maltese patient dies after travelling to UK for treatment and catching COVID-19. Pierre Portelli told YORGEN FENECH to leak article attacking PN's youth wing, and a Maltese MEP pressures Google and Facebook to pay for news. At the end of this show, we've got a really special interview with architect and structural engineer Konrad Xuereb. He's here to discuss Malta's metro plans, what he thinks about them. It's a really interesting conversation. Make sure you stay tuned. Tim, to kick us off.
Yes, so there was quite a tragic accident early in the morning yesterday. James Barbara, the boss of the renowned catering company James Caterers, and his wife were involved in an extremely serious accident in Zaytoun, in Tripbolna. We don't exactly know how the accident happened exactly, but the end result is that they crashed into an old windmill, severely, damaging the structure as well. So the car must have been going at quite a high velocity. The pictures of the incident, show it was quite that everything is in quite a bad state. In fact, it's believed that they're in serious condition in hospital. So, yes, we hope for the best for them, but it looks quite serious.
Yes, we really do wish them a speedy recovery. An interesting story I saw this morning related to it on the Times of Malta. They spoke to the owner of the residence, and he sort of described how, it's not the first time someone has crashed into his house, and sort of counting his blessings that he wasn't in the room that they collided with. We wish Mr. Barbara and his wife a really speedy recovery. It's a really tragic accident. We hope they get well soon. On to our next story concerning PBS, Malta's national broadcaster. So millions of euro in taxpayer money is currently being drained at PBS, that hosts TVM and TVM2. Those are Malta's largest broadcasters. The figures were revealed on Wednesday following a parliamentary question. Minister Carmela Abela tabled the accounts for 2017-2018 and 2018-2019. The latest years haven't been completed. However, they do tell quite a worrying story at PBS. At the end of 2019, they made a loss of 557,000 roughly, and the total liabilities exceeded assets around 5.9 million. That's a really, really worrying state of affairs at the national broadcaster. Sources even told Lovin Malta that debt could almost be at around 10 million now. It's a really worrying state of affairs, and it's only getting worse, right? PBS currently have a 10 million fee to pay on a pension issue that's currently being settled in court, while they're also going to have to pay a further 200,000 to their former CEO John Bundy, who, as Lovin Malta have reported, sort of raised concerns about financial mismanagement at PBS while he was there. It's really worrying, seeing them in this state, considering the funds and the subsidies they get, right, Tim?
Well, yes. Just going back to John Bundy, so in his testimony at his tribunal, he said that he found out that the big cheeses at PBS and the board of directors are spending thousands every year on lunches, that Malta had to agreed to fork out 24,000 euro for other countries to participate in the Junior Eurovision. I mean, when you see these numbers and then look at the fact that the station is severely in debt, you start to understand them a little bit more, I think. Before we move on to our next story, just a quick word from our sponsors, Miles Express.
At Miles Express, we go the extra mile to deliver your packages and documents on time, every time. Whether you're an online retailer that needs to deliver parcels to your customers or a professional looking to courier your documents, you can rest assured your clients will receive the professional service they deserve. We deliver all around Malta and Gozo, making sure your deliveries are carried out efficiently so you can focus on your business. Miles Express, the real express people.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. On to our next story. Quite a sad one. A Maltese cancer patient in his 50s travelled to the UK, as many Maltese cancer patients do, to undergo an operation for a rare form of cancer in his back. Doctors gave him a 5% chance of recovery. However, the operation was a success, and he was on the mend. But then, unfortunately, he got COVID-19 and ended up passing away while still in the UK. Now, you can just, Lovin Malta spoke to the family, and you can just understand what, the roller coaster of emotions that they were going through. First, the father gets cancer, then it seems that he's going to recover, and then he gets COVID and dies, and they can't even get his body back to Malta for proper burial. The only option they've been given is, have his remains placed in an urn, and the urn will be shipped to Malta. So, extremely sad situation. Also raises questions on whether Malta should be perhaps doing more to treat its own patients on its own soil, right?
Yes, really, really sad story. But as you were saying, it does raise questions on maybe why so many Maltese patients are sent abroad. We've got an amazing hospital, we've got amazing doctors, amazing nurses, really, really incredible, hardworking staff. But then still we have to send some people away from the country to get treatment, which can be quite difficult in itself. Obviously, it has to be made clear that, there is an economies of scale, and it's just maybe the realities of a tiny island. But still, people during COVID are still being made to go far away from their families, where they could potentially, end up dying far away from home, which is a sad reality I don't think many of us want. On to our next story, just some more revelations about the former PN head of Media Link, PIERRE Portelli. Lovin Malta recently exposed that PIERRE Portelli reached out to YORGEN FENECH to leak an article attacking MZPN, the PN's news youth wing, to Labour Party-leaning media. Portelli, who at the time was the head of Media Link and effectively Adrian Delia's right-hand man, reached out to FENECH to leak a story to Orizzont, the General Workers' Union newspaper, to tell him that MZPN had been taken over by Occupy Justice and David Casa. At the time, MZPN were actually calling for Adrian Delia's resignation following a really poor performance in the MEP elections, which there are allegations, that PIERRE Portelli and Adrian Delia were accepting bribes from YORGEN FENECH not to get David Casa elected. At the time, while FENECH might have not been known to be the murder suspect of the Daphne Caruana Galizia assassination, he was certainly outed to be the owner of 17 Black, which is the Dubai-based company linked to so many corruption scandals, at this rate, I've lost count. And just to make matters worse, Portelli is still an executive member of the PN, so we're waiting to see exactly how the party will react.
This was before the election, right?
Yeah, yes.
Before the election. So yes, what's really interesting in all of this is obviously everyone who remembers the MEP election from 2 years ago remembers the intense infighting within the PN at the time. However, the hidden hand of YORGEN FENECH has now been revealed. Now, remember, this was after the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, but this was one of the top businessmen in Malta. So why on earth would you agree to be the middleman between PIERRE Portelli and a newspaper to leak dirt on the youth wing of the PN? I mean, it's something that really should seem beneath him, unless he had an extremely strong interest in electing certain candidates or making sure certain candidates weren't elected. Now, the reason that he would have for this is so that his own dirty deals don't get exposed beyond Malta's shores. And the fact that the PN just played into his hands, I think it's quite telling. On to our final story of the day, another MEP, Alex Saliba, who was elected from that same election, is now pressuring Google and Facebook to pay media outlets for the news that they share on their platforms. And this is a very new debate. It started off in Australia where MPs are pushing forward this bill despite a lot of resistance from the tech titans. And now the debate has extended to Europe as well. So Xuereb was the rapporteur of a landmark European piece of legislation, proposed legislation, called the Digital Services Act, which is the EU's attempt to regulate technology and social media. And now this issue of whether Google and Facebook should pay for news wasn't included in the bill, but there's still a chance to amend it. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I mean, I know there was quite a debate about whether media companies choose to be on Facebook, so why should Facebook have to pay them to be on their own platform? And it is a fair point. However, I also think that the role of platforms like Google and Facebook in today's world really needs to be analyzed properly, right? So they're a company, but they're not just a private company. They're a bit more. They're so powerful that they have the power to block the president of the United States, right? So some enforced social responsibility is definitely needed.
Yes, and to be honest, I sort of like the proposal because it might sort of address the issues of modern media houses sort of failing to make ends meet with revenue, right? Social media platforms and media houses sort of form a symbiotic relationship, right? At the moment, you've got social media platforms, though, who are making all the money, whereas media houses are struggling. So maybe a bit of a balancing act might help out. On a separate note, I just want to note, well done again to Alex Xuereb. He's really making waves in the European Parliament, despite only being there for 2 years. I guess it just goes to prove that, even if you come from a small island, you can still make a massive effect in such a huge fora like this. Just a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by Miles Express. Miles Express is an independent global contractor offering goods transport and logistics solutions. You can head over to www.milesxp.com to find out more. Stay tuned. We're just going to play a short clip. Coming up next is Konrad Xuereb. He's a structural engineer and architect who's going to be talking about Malta's metro plans. It's going to be really interesting, so stay tuned.
Make sure you're not the smartest person in the room.
Try to be a very good number two. That is the worst advice I ever received in my life.
If possible, make sure you're the stupidest person in the room. If you're not, you're in the wrong room.
I don't really believe in difficult decisions.
You always have that gut feeling in everything you do.
From that, I decided I have to be the number one in my own journey. No one else is number one.
A decision is a decision.
A lot of people place too much emphasis on luck.
Say more yeses, take more risks.
I let my gut be my compass, so to speak.
To invest more in relationships.
I think the biggest myth of business is that things are easy.
You have to fight back, you have to be aggressive in the same way.
Nothing is the end of the world except the end of the world.
You're the strengthened for it for your next challenge.
Dominant in the same way and level yourself to the same attitude.
Everybody else, I wanted to be some big sports hero, but that didn't happen, unfortunately.
You have to own up to that decision and you just execute.
Luck will always feature in everything in life. Most likely, more is not the answer.
I wanted to become Malta's biggest businessman.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which is bullshit, basically.
Apparti li segwi l-ħolm tiegħek, però krux ta' kollox hija li temmen fik innifsek.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. With me now is architect and structural engineer Konrad Xuereb, who has proposed one of the most interesting projects, I'd say, in recent Maltese history, which is an underground metro to connect Malta and Gozo. Konrad, thanks for accepting our invitation to be on this show.
Good morning.
So there's been a lot of talk about a proposal to build two new flyovers, in Msida. You said that Station 7 in your metro plan could be an alternative to these flyovers. Could you explain, please?
Yes, the underlying notion is that Malta has reached a saturation point where we cannot keep on widening roads and chopping out trees. And the conundrum to it is that the more you widen roads, the more you induce demand. So the problem is actually increasing, not being resolved. So I think we need to rephrase the question how to address it is, how do we solve the problem? And the problem is solved by reducing the cost. So these proposed flyovers might make you go faster along those 100 meters, but then take you faster to the next traffic jam. So overall, it will take you much more time. So we've been strong advocates, me, myself, and my practice, that we need to urgently shift to a mass transit. And our proposal, we propose a station 7 at Msida between University and Matadei, but it could be complemented by another one in front of the church. And like so, the whole area can then be pedestrianized, similar to other areas where we're proposing our stations in the plan.
So your proposed metro has 3 lines, right? There's one from Mellieħa to Birżebbuġa and the airport, there's one from St. Paul's Bay to the airport and then to the center of Malta, and then another one from leading up to Gozo as well. And your proposal is that the Gozo line should replace the tunnel that people have been talking about for years, right?
Well, just to correct this point, we are proposing one line, but built in 3 phases.
Okay.
So once it's built in its whole entirety, you will never need to change train to go from any destination on the metro to another destination. The colors in our scheme show how it will be built. So the first phase will be the red one from Mellieħa to the airport via Birżebbuġa, as you mentioned. Then the second one will be from the airport to St. Paul's Bay, closing a loop. And the third one, our hypothesis has always been that if Gozo is going to be connected to Malta with a permanent link, I emphasize if, then there should be an extension of a mass transit that Malta urgently needs, but not a car tunnel, because a car tunnel will effectively solve nothing. It would actually worsen the situation of traffic and create more woes to Gosdens without even addressing their issues properly.
So that means that you won't be able to drive from Malta to Gozo or back, you have to use the metro for sure, or will the ferry still be in play?
Yes, the beauty of a metro, it is multimodal, so it doesn't conflict with other modes of transport, it actually complements them. So the ferries will actually be as strong as they are today. Likewise, buses. Buses are very important. I do the analogy of a metro proposal with a tree, where the metro is the main trunk, then the branches of the tree are the buses, and then you have cycling, electric scooters and walking to go from starting point to end destination. So people from Gozo, from Rabat, will be able to go to university in 30 minutes, whether it's sunny, windy, 4-7 or a thunderstorm, and back at the same day. And they won't need to rent an Msida, and that will reverse the brain drain, which has been happening in the past decades in Gozo, with €2 only. And still, though, the ferries will be in service, so freight or containers will then use the ferries at determined times to cross, and likewise people who would still want to go by car can use the ferries accordingly.
On your metro map, there's a lot of concentration of lines towards the east of Malta. However, the west seems to be quite empty. So if you live in Rabat, how will you be able to catch the metro?
With all mass transit systems, one has to adopt an efficient balance. So the key is to see where most people live on the island and where most business activities are and where most tourists visit Malta and Gozo, and connect them. So the key is to connect as many people with the least possible length. So as I said, then the metro will be multimodal. So if you see where we are proposing with the red, blue, and the extension to Gozo, it picks up about 80% of the population, 75-80%. Then there'll be shuttle buses, for example, from Osta, every 5 minutes, there'll be non-stop shuttle buses to Rabat. From Paola, there'll be non-stop shuttle buses to the 3 cities, and so on and so forth. From Birżebbuġa, there'll be non-stop shuttle services to Marsaxlokk.
So multimodal system that you were talking about?
Yes, like in London, we live in Putney, and Putney is the size of Sliema and St. Julian's, and there are 2 stations, like we're proposing Sliema and St. Julian's stations, and then once you exit the station, you catch a bus for 5 minutes, and then you're around the corner from where you live. So it's nothing dissimilar in principle.
Will Malta need to increase its population for this to be viable?
No, that's the beauty of it. We've worked using the data that we have nowadays, so using a population of 500,000 people, and assuming only that only 1 in 4 of the people use the metro once, and assuming €2, and it makes it financially feasible with a payback period of much less than 30 years.
Once a day?
Once a day. One journey, going and coming back.
So it will be feasible if just a quarter of the population uses the metro every day, of the current population.
And if you see other cities and other countries, statistics show that more than that will use it. To mention also then the tourists on average. I mean, this year and last year have been of different years due to COVID. But if you take 2019 figures, if you take only 1 in 4 of the tourists who come every year spending only 5 days using the metro also, it will furthermore increase the financial viability of the system.
Mm-hmm. You said you predicted it will take 10 years to complete the entire project. Don't you think you might be being a bit overly optimistic when you consider that Malta Day took 12 years to build?
No, I mean, these are different type of projects. For example, we need to get a tunneling boring machine, which 2 of them we're assuming in our project, which right now there are a lot saying Crossrail London, but any other cities where similar projects are being done. So it entails a specialized sort of type of working. To run the equipment, but we factor that in, and no, I think we are able to do these projects. It takes a serious frame of mind of staff and a serious group of team of people to propel it forward, but we are able to do it, and it will. And 10 years is actually being not optimistic, actually being conservative. And the red part of our route, which is the bulk, which links St. Julian's, Bargeville, Sliema, Valletta, Malta Day University to the airport, and Zaytun, Tarshen will take 5 years. So after detailed studies are carried out, environmental, archaeological, etc. So if the studies are ready today and we start the works tomorrow, in 5 years' time, in 2025, we'll have the first part of our metro working. Of stuff, it won't start tomorrow because we need to do detailed studies. But we can do it, and it is the way forward for the country.
So the studies are apparently they're almost done, right? According to the government, they've been saying, last July, the Prime Minister said that the plan's are nearing completion. We've been hearing this for a while, and somehow the actual implementation stage is always a long time away. Are you convinced that there exists enough political will to see this through?
I've not been privy to the studies the government has been carried out. I took an initiative 2 years ago because I used to live in UK with my family, and we moved here as a family, and I could see that this is not the way we should be proceeding as a country, and we had to make an urgent shift away from a car-centric society to a people-focused society. Hence why what is beautiful about what I'm doing is that I set the brief, and the brief was what is best for this country. So the metro proposal we proposed, the main aim is how to solve Malta's woes. Of the government said that they're carrying out other studies, but 2 years ago the government said it's going to take 25 years, and now I think 2 weeks ago they said it's going to be 10 years, similar to what I've been saying for the past 3 years. So hopefully it's moving in the right direction. Having said that, these projects take time to get consensus. So what I've been trying to do in the past 3 years is to show the people that it can be done. It is feasible technically and even financially. And I am pleased that nowadays people see that it is the way forward, it can be done. And I feel there's the national consensus on that.
There's a popular theory which states that in periods of economic downturn, the government should spend even more than it usually does on infrastructure projects to boost the economy. So in a way, do you think that COVID-19 and the crisis around it might mean that this is the perfect time to go for a massive project like this?
Yes, I think it's ideal. It's ideal because what COVID has done, and I see it not just in Malta, but especially overseas, it has really changed the way people are thinking, especially from a climate conscious point of view. Malta is one of the signatories signed to the Paris Agreement, and with huge obligations, and the EU has set the 2050 target to be net zero carbon, and to achieve that we need to move ASAP away from a car-centric, and it's a catalyst. So we see what Paris, Stockholm, Berlin, Holland have been doing over the past year, especially 2 years, have been actually taking the theories they knew had to be done into practice. So they've used COVID to implement these measures. And I think Malta, it's important if we want to remain having a competitive edge, and even from a tourism, we need to shift this car-centric focus to a people focus, that will then get more funding and more research, etc., which we need, rather than revert having a brain drain. And yes, we can do it. And to pick on the point you're saying, in times of downturn, usually governments do spend more on public projects. The beauty of it is that we're saying that every penny euro that the government will be spending, he will get even a great return on it long term.
Yeah. And finally, you mentioned at the start that the metro can allow for more pedestrianized projects, right? So we recently saw the Champs-Élysées proposal in Paris, and then another group of architects said that the same thing can happen in Florian and St. Anne's Street. So when the metro is complete, do you really see that certain, currently main roads can actually be converted, cars move out completely, and this becomes a pedestrianized zone?
Yes, correct. And that's the whole beauty of it, of this proposal, is that the problem in Malta right now is that there's no alternative. So people go take the car for anything they need to do. As soon as you give the alternative, and usually young people are the catalyst of it, and then older people will follow, people will not use the car. So there'll be a shift reduction in car use. If you see how many cars are registered in Malta pro rata compared to other cities and countries, we're nearly double. So per se, that as a simple equation tells you cars will be halved. And once you have an alternative, then you can take active measures like the mayor of Paris, Hidalgo, who was bold in saying, yes, let's pedestrianize Champs-Élysées as a project. If you take Barcelona, they've been doing it with La Rambla. So these projects, which fellow other architects, I think are great initiatives, in my opinion, especially for St. Anne's Street, but also for PIERRE by other architects, would work once you have an alternative mode of transport, a mass transit system in Malta, because then you can take active measures to pedestrianize roads. But this could even be in Mosta, for example, Trafalgar Square in Mosta, the main avenue, say Paola, beautiful avenue over there. If it's pedestrianized, it starts catalyzing business, and more businesses start opening, and then you have shuttle buses to the 3 cities. So it has a roll-on effect on other.
That having more cars in an area could actually harm businesses in a way.
Yes,
it's better for them if it's a pedestrianized area.
Correct, and the current measures being implemented of road widening, it's been scientifically proven, actually induces more demand for roads. So the problem is actually getting worse, and ultimately it's like a bottleneck. You can widen, but ultimately you need to get out of the main road. So what are we going to do next? Cut through and demolish the center of our towns. Because ultimately you're just shifting the problem and actually making it worse just by widening roads.
Konrad Xuereb, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all for us from today. Stay tuned to lovinmalta.com for all the latest updates on what's going on inside the country. And until we meet again, have a day full of loving.